right, welcome guys to Q&A with Mitch and Jay. Admittedly, a little bit goofy of a name, but man, we're super pumped to answer some questions from our community, from our athletes. And Mitch and I are just going to riff on a couple questions today. So what do you got, Mitch?
Yeah, so got a question. First one we go over is someone I spoke to the other day that's a coach as well as an athlete. Brittany Kennedy is coached by Paige and is a Run Free coach herself. Had a long talk with her regarding some discomfort she was having, and we went kind of deeper into a lot of other topics. So a couple of the questions she had was like I said, she contacted me in regard to injury stuff and form. So let me read you some of the questions that she wrote, some of the comments. I was expecting him to pick apart my form and make many corrections. However, while he did give me some incredible helpful mobility work, the focus for me was more that I am way too tense and need to just allow my body to run and not overthink hitting certain paces or stress over races. So with that comment, I just want to touch on a piece there. You know, when I'm looking at form, there are very specific and technical areas to form that we can really overthink, especially like finding any asymmetry whatsoever and trying to correct that. When everyone has asymmetries and it's not necessarily needed to correct unless it's creates like a delay or a inefficiency in the stride. But what I find with her and find with a lot of athletes is like, when I look at them, I can tell where they are scared in their stride, where they are nervous. So some people are nervous to turn over faster based on like a previous injury or something like that. Some people are nervous to really hit the ground or put a lot of compression on the ground. So all their positions are great, but they're kind of touching the ground. They're not going down and through the ground. So there's a lot of, I see this a lot when you talk about athletes, which is the majority of us that experience previous injuries. Because I know for me, when I was in high school, the meet after my nationals, I tore my hamstring. And I'd always been like a long strider, but for years and years and almost decades, I didn't want to turn over super fast. And I just avoided that. So I like increased my stride length and I would kind of bound along because I have natural elasticity. But if someone watched me, they could absolutely tell that I'm like scared to turn my legs over faster. Because when it happened, I was going full speed and my legs were turning over so fast and it just went. And that stuck with me for 10, 15 years. That stuck with me. So I think pinpointing those sort of insecurities in your stride, and I know it sounds a little bit deep and silly, but like that's really like a huge part of being able to correct inefficiencies and correct sort of delays in your stride. And another way to find those positions, if you're not doing a form analysis, the way to find it on your own is a couple of ways. Like let's take a look at stability, for instance. If you can balance really well on one leg and not really well on the other, that's a pretty obvious sign that there's something going on the leg. So the instability, the fact that you have one good leg and one bad leg in terms of stability is like I guess I should say the bottom level, but there's a whole puzzle above it that we need to go through. So like, if you have that instability, go on your good leg, go on your bad leg, and really like be intentional about what is going on. Why do you have this instability? Are you scared of correcting? Are you scared of stabilizing through the midfoot because of some previous ankle injury? Or are you just dropping into your hip because of some sort of lack of core stability? And I think a lot can be done by you being intentional about what is going on inside your body. And I think it's a piece of athleticism that the pros have that, but in terms of recreational athletes, I don't know that a lot of them are really diving deep into what is going on in the body and why, and how do I fix it? Because you can fix a lot by yourself. It just takes practice. It takes like a deeper feeling of um, sort of a deeper kinesthetic awareness of what is actually going on inside and why you scared to be in that position. So
Hey,
another example, yeah.
yeah, this reminds me of a conversation we had maybe as long as a year ago, just about high school athletes and younger athletes, and the fact that there are some paces for them that are just more natural
Yeah.
and they look better.
Mhm.
And so then there's a question like, maybe we just let them run like that really good looking form pace a little bit more often,
Yeah.
and we change like the reps and the rest to match like how they look smooth, and then we allow them to grow in that smoothness. So is there any part of that we can do as older athletes?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot to be said about smoothness of the gait, okay? Um, if we take running, a lot of people view running as like the fitness. Running is like however fit you are, that's how far or fast or anything like that. And I'm not sure that's 100% or even 70%. I would say on the other side, running is it's a movement that your body enjoys, and your body enjoys movements that are fluid. The body doesn't respond well to movements that are like either mentally being struggled to go through or physically being struggled to go through. It creates this like negative scenario in our body. So I feel like when we, like for instance, when we're talking about high school athletes, I would rather see someone be super smooth and enjoy the movement than struggle to go slower. Or we see when you go slow, we see all these inefficiencies pop up, or we see the person like not enjoying the movement. And I think that goes for older athletes as well, where if you're just overthinking your stride because you want to hit the certain pace, I would say that that's almost more of a negative versus just practicing sort of this fluid mechanics and just letting your body turn over. And I was talking to Brittany the other day, is if you have previous injuries or you're currently struggling with some sort of discomfort, you you are you can divide yourself into two camps, okay? You're either struggling with discomfort, you don't trust your body, and can't run you can't run naturally. And in that camp, I would say that's okay. Well, we don't need to be pushing ourselves and running right now. We need to be finding why can we not let ourselves go and just run naturally, okay? And then there's this other camp where you are healthy and you can just let yourself go. You trust your body. You don't have to overthink your stride. You don't have to overthink your paces, your stride. And there's what I found is a lot of people are 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So they've had a previous injury, but they've come through that injury fine. They work on strength, stability, mobility, coordination, and all that stuff. But they're running like they're still not trusting their body. So they're kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out in those camps. And I think there comes a point where you have to say, okay, can I trust my body? And can I just learn to like let go and roll how my body wants to do naturally? If you're not at that point, then mobility, soft tissue work, strength coordination, all that stuff is paramount over like getting the miles in or getting the speed in. So you have to kind of decide where you are. Do you trust your body or do you not trust your body? And that's a crucial determinant of how your training and your running should go. If you trust your body, you need to let go, stop overthinking, and just roll with it. Just let it, sometimes if I don't run for a long time, or I get in a race after a long time off, I kind of like, I might stress on, what's this race going to be? How am I going to run? But then you got to think, like, I've been running for 28 years of my life. It's not just going to switch off because I didn't run a week, right? So you have to kind of, there has to be a point. Which camp are you in? Do you trust your body or do you not trust your body? And that will determine paces, distance, as well as what is a priority. What is a priority in your running or training? I hope that answers your question.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I've noticed for me that as I've taken some of the form cues you've given me to not float as much and to get back to the ground quicker and push through the ground a little bit harder. I also found this, I'm not sure if you told me this or someone else. I found this article about Usain Bolt, and apparently he has produced more power on a force plate than anyone ever produced running.
Yeah.
And so the thought process that I think connects the dots for me on that is, the more force I'm able to put into the ground and the quicker I can get back to the ground again, the faster I'm going to run. But to do that, my body has to be capable of handling that force.
Yeah.
And I also have to trust, even though I've had a surgery on both of my feet, like I've had to really recalibrate and rethink. And I know your Achilles issue too, you've had to do the same. But yeah, just understanding that thought process of, the goal is not to skate on top of the ground. The goal is to like drive through the ground.
Yeah.
And then be quick about getting back to the ground. Like, that's helped me connect those dots of, I feel like that's what you're saying when you say trust your body, is trust it to hold up to getting down to the ground fast, pushing through the ground fully.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, that relates directly to, we got this question from Ben Hinton, right? And I think he's coached by Jimmy Stephenson.
Yeah.
And I gave him a cue when he was at the Run Free camp in Crested Butte. And the cue I give this to a lot of people, and this is the stroller cue, right? So if you're running and pushing a stroller, let's say there's a toddler in it and you're going slightly uphill. Every time you are in the air, you're decelerating. So it kind of gives you this like exaggerated sort of picture of when you're decelerating in a stride. If you're in the air, if you're trying to bound along up a hill pushing a stroller, you're going to decelerate every time you're in the air. So if you get your foot on the ground, what you'll notice is like you decelerate less because you're not in the air so much, but also you become this sort of machine that's turning over and landing on the ground with this like really nice shin angle. And by shin angle, we mean like, okay, the knee is kind of in front of the ankle, so that you can only produce power down and backwards. There's no forward or overstriding. There's no like inefficiency in your power application. Okay, so like when you get on the ground faster, you kind of you're trying to push the stroller uphill, you're pushing down and backwards naturally because your knee is in a position where it's over your ankle. I always think of it like, if you were to draw a stick figure running, you wouldn't draw with the straight front leg, because no one would know that stick figure is running. You would draw it with the knee up, and then the ankle sort of behind the knee pointing down and backwards. And that would be the only indication of the stick figure that it is running. So when you're doing the stroller cue, it's not about leaning forward and pushing the stroller. It's about, don't be in the air so long because we find people going in the air a lot because they want to subconsciously rest a little bit, especially if you have that nice spring. It's very easy to get in the air, and that little sort of fraction of a second extra before you get to the ground, you can look really nice in the air, and you feel sort of canyon a little bit, right? And you just kind of like feel like you're bouncing along, and you almost feel like you should be in front of a camera, but it's, I think it's a subconscious way of resting, because what happens when we get in the air, we see a foot flick forward and then a pull back, and there's some distances where that's okay, but when we're talking about longer distance, it's really about imagining you pushing down and through the ground, that nice negative shin angle, and not being in the air where you're decelerating too much. Because if we take running as the most basic version of running, is you're going forward. Everything else we're doing when we're going up, when we're trying to lengthen out our stride or lengthen out our legs at the back, because we see high level people doing and our legs are going so far back, or we up in the air and we're foot flicking forward to look really nice. This is all just delays and going forward. And at the base of everything, running is going forward. You need to get to that next step, and you need to push down into the ground. So I think that stroller cue, and you can actually practice this on the treadmill, where go and run like you normally would. Put your hands against the treadmill. Don't lean into it or anything. Put your hands against the front of the treadmill and just turn over. You don't have to go faster or anything like that. Just turn over and see what happens. See how you're landing differently, and really like analyze that a little bit. And then let go of the front. And what you'll find is you actually run into the front of the treadmill. It's not because you're trying harder. It's just because you've taken some of those inefficiencies, like excess airtime or backside mechanics, which causes a lot of delays. You've taken that out of the equation. So you can actually find that people's paces completely change just based on the fact that they're actually learning to just turn over. And admittedly, it does take, I would say, a couple weeks to adapt your hips to turning over a little faster. Your hips might get a little bit tired, but that's okay. Like that's, what we're coming back to is a more natural stride. If you watch a kid run, they're not bouncing. They're just turning over like this. And their ankles and their knees are all at great positions. And what they're doing is essentially just doing the stroller drill. So getting on that treadmill and just using that as a guide, I think is really helpful. And we've seen some great results, not to mention you're talking about less impact forces. So you actually see a reduction in injuries in a lot of our athletes. And if someone is injured and I see them bouncing, fixing the injury, that's one thing, but also just correcting the fact they don't have to bounce so much, or giving them that stroller drill and that stroller cue has really been helpful.
So just to clarify, you can also do this just when you're out running, just by taking your hands and just putting them out as if you're touching the handles on, like you're just putting your hands flat against the handles on the treadmill. So we were doing that in Crested Butte just to work on. And then the other thing, just to further drive home like that injury prevention point, is so years ago, I was coaching a guy who was over 300 pounds, and he was at a PT clinic, and I went with him. He was asking me to go with him. And at this PT clinic, they were analyzing his form, and they were trying to make his stride longer. Yeah. And I was like, afterwards, I was like, no, do not do that. Like, think about it this way. If I go 100 meters and I only take like 30 steps, I'm basically like triple jumping the whole 100. Yeah. Like the impact is massive.
Huge force, huge impact. Yeah.
Huge impact. Whereas if I go 100 meters and I take 200 steps, the impact per step is far less. And so I always like to bring that up to give like a visual representation. Like, And if you are a heavier athlete, that's one way you can reduce your injury potential,
For sure.
is turn over a little bit quicker and don't put so much force every
Yeah.
step.
And I think you nailed something when you were speaking earlier, Jay, about force production and trusting your body to put force through the ground. And that's one facet of something runners definitely need to work on. But I would say more importantly than force production is the location and the direction of force production, right? So when we're talking about turning over faster, it's very hard to overstride if you're just turning your legs over like this, right? There's like no time. You also get off the ground faster. There's no time to like do awkward things in the air. You're just getting onto the ground. And I think, just like anything, that extreme is not that's the extreme version of whenever we try and set up a running cue or train different sort of coordinations, you kind of do train that extreme version so that you can come back to the middle ground when you're actually running. But long strides, not the best, and short strides, not the best. What you want to find is that everyone's different, but everyone might only be different within 20% of this middle ground, so I think the placement of the foot is significantly more important, especially for sort of sub-elite and recreational runners, than it is like the force production or anything like that. So
yeah, and there's another thought that I think people struggle with is the thought process of, if I'm going to run faster, I need my stride to be quote unquote longer. Yeah. And then they misinterpret that as my legs are going to be further apart from each other.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah. And so like after creating a quicker stride cadence and you're putting decent force in the ground, you're actually going to travel further per stride. And when you look at like these crazy fast guys like Cheptegei and Bekele and even Kipchoge, like they are turning over so fast, so smooth, and at the same time they're traveling really far because they're putting good force into the ground. So it's like that perfect combination of all of those things, like fluidity's there, cadence is there, the body trust to put into the ground is there. And man, this is no different than most things in our lives. Most of the time, like the far extremes are not like the place we want to be. We want to have like good combinations of like the different things. Yeah.
But I think I think we romanticize the extremes. We romanticize like the long, beautiful bounding stride, right? And then we romanticize like the super high cadence. And I think for recreational runners, I think the first thing that needs is like, just practice your cadence. The cadence will make you in better shape just turning over faster. The bounce and the power and all that'll come through higher mileage, that'll come through lifting, that'll come through plyometrics and all that. But I think the cadence is like number one. It doesn't matter how strong you are, if you're only turning over 154 strides per minute, it's not conducive to running a good marathon, right? So I think I did want to touch on this. When you're doing the cadence stuff, a good indication is how still is your head. Okay, so just turn over so your head almost remains still, and that'll be an exaggerated cue. Whenever someone gives cues, I don't want to give a cue like this is the perfect form. A cue is an exaggerated way to connect with something so that you can bring it back to the middle ground. So I think having your head still and just kind of turning over, feeling kind of like machine-like, just to practice that cadence. The head, the sort of vertical oscillation of the head is a very good indication of if you're at the right cadence or how comfortable you are. And it's something that I look at in form analysis a lot.
Well, sweet, man. I think we're going to pause there and we'll answer some more questions next week. Thanks guys for watching, and hope everybody has a good day.
Thanks, guys.